Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Joshua, like the deepening of frost in the slow night by Gyte. This is microtonal black metal, and it is some of the most abrasive music I've ever listened to. This is a rough listen, but this album has such a weird vibe that keeps me coming back to it. One of the things I love about metal is how bizarre it can get, and this one is pretty out there. I had a hard time picking one off the album because they're all so very strange in unique ways. I think it's safe to say this won't be your cup of tea, but it is so unique, I figured it was worth a listen. Well, that's an introduction right there. Let's dive into this, like the deepening of frost in the slow night. No intro, just kicks right into this. We're in 5. We're in 3. Yeah, I mean, if they're going for microtonal and abrasive and lo-fi, why not throw an odd meter in there on top of it? If they're just really going for the opposite of palatable, stay away from 4/4. Do it all. I am not in the right mindset to be given this. I'm going to do my best in the analysis, though. Trying to meet it on its own terms here. I think that last section was 9. At least based on the drums. Interesting drum pattern too. It's literally that crash and snare on every downbeat. I thought maybe there was eighth note bass kicks, but I don't even hear them. And of course the snare is turned off to give it that really flat thud rather than the nice crack. The cacophony expands. What? Even in this section, they're out of time. This is what I was. Well, we heard this at the beginning. I don't think I called it out though. Well, I will say there is one thing wrong in the context. Said it wouldn't be my cup of tea. This is so far away from my cup of tea. That is quite the understatement. Um, Jokes aside, though, this is fascinating. Not necessarily because of what it ends up being, at least not for me. I find it fascinating on a purely musician level, on the performance side of it. Are they playing with microtonal instruments, or are they all out of tune? Because I think that's really interesting right there. Did they all, you know, hit the E on the piano, tune their E string to E, their lowest string on their guitar, tune it to E, and then just bring it down a little bit. And the other one brings it up a little bit. So one's just a hair bit sharper than the other. And technically, we are working with microtones. We are between the E and the F, or the E and the E flat. And then you tune the rest of your strings against your E string that you have. And then you play your part, right? And so then you're going to get all of the dissonance out of it. Because here's the thing, microtonal doesn't mean dissonance. However, every time I've heard microtonal music on the channel, dissonance has been a strong component of it. And I don't believe consonance can't be achieved through microtonal tunings. But when you have an instrument that isn't microtonal, which I'm going to assume, possibly wrongly, I appreciate I might be wrong in this, I'm going to assume these are traditional electric guitars with frets. And while you can play around with microtonality between the frets, it is a lot easier to do so on a fretless instrument. And they might have fretless instruments, I don't know. But given the types of dissonance I heard, and the way that the microtonality appeared to be employed, I'm going to wager that they achieved it by detuning the instruments slightly in opposite directions to encourage the dissonance to shine through in their music. It is exceptionally aggressive. The music, at least for me, does not want to be listened to. It is antagonistic. There is not a single moment where I did not want to turn this off. And that made me focus on other things as well. It's not just that the instruments sound out of tune at any given time. The performances also sound out of time. And I pointed this out at the end. There's also a moment closer to the beginning, about a minute and a half into the track, when we get to a more spacious section and we get, I think it's an isolated guitar. If there is a rhythm guitar around it, it is not very loud. There's emptiness in the upper aspect of the song. Like I said, it's a bit more spacious. And primarily what we can easily hear is a lead guitar and a drummer. And they occasionally hit the beat together and frequently don't. One's just a hair ahead or behind. There's a little bit of rushing, a little bit of dragging going on. This is not just microtonal, where we are working with pitches between the temperament that they've chosen, but there's also timing that fits in between the proper timings that the band should be working within. And so where our notes are slightly flat or slightly sharp, our timing when we hit it is slightly behind or slightly ahead of the beats. There's very few instances where the pitch is right on and the timing is right on between multiple instruments. And that's what a majority of this track feels like to me. And I don't want that to be taken in a negative light. I'm not sitting here saying that these are people who don't know how to play music. I'm not saying they don't know how to utilize their instruments. but it's really difficult, at least for me, to not hear, and I bring this up every time we get to avant-garde music, to not hear a classroom or a rehearsal space before rehearsal where people are warming up. Now, I will say, musically, when we get rid of the pitch and we look at rhythms, this is a lot more cohesive than some avant-garde music we listen to. I would never classify this as avant-garde. I can very clearly hear where we get counterpoint in the guitars. I can clearly hear rhythmic ideas in the drums. I can clearly hear where we should be getting harmonic concepts, consonant harmonic concepts in the guitars. The writing is all exceptionally well done for black metal. There's some really cool ideas in here. It's just that the pitches chosen for those notes are what create the abrasion and what makes it difficult to listen to. But even through that lens, because everyone's out of tune, it also kind of it forces my brain to think of rehearsal spaces, and then it makes it difficult to hear some of these elements working together in the way that I know they are. But because sonically it doesn't feel like that, my brain's like, no, that can't possibly be it. It's a really interesting song to listen to from a purely performance-based perspective. Because at least for me, half of it felt like a band working together, creating a very specific sound, and the other half felt like a bunch of people in a room playing very different ideas. And my brain was constantly battling between these two impressions of the music, which, like I had mentioned, is fascinating for me at least. It's very rare that I hear a song in a type of duality like that, and I'm sure that's not their intention. I'm bringing a very specific classical background and experience as a musician to this reading. Maybe it's what they had in mind, but I would wager that not a high percentage of their listener base would understand their intentions then. And that's why I'm not really thinking that's what they're aiming for. But that duality is something I absolutely experienced throughout this track, and it was really difficult to focus in on what I think was the authorial intent and not let it slip into what I feel is what I'm bringing to the track itself. If there was one thing I wanted to point out as exceptionally well done, honestly, all of it. This is something I bring up with most music like this, is that on the performance side, depending on where your schooling and your practice comes from, this is exceptionally difficult to do. To force yourself to play off the beat, to force yourself to play out of tune. Um, every ounce of my body, if I were in their position, would be fighting against that. It would be so difficult for me to purposefully land, behind the beat, or to purposefully play a little sharp. Granted, with the guitar, it's a little easier because you just tune it and then you try to stay on the fret. But um, like I said, at least in my position, 15 years of trumpet behind me, every ounce of my being is consonants. It's drilled into me to play on the beat, to play with the group. Um, and so it goes against all of my musical upbringing to do something like this if I were in their position. So there's just something about that I just have to bring up on the performance side. Everybody just being able to possibly go against their instinct and to create this. It is not easy. Um, but I also want to praise specifically the vocals. Very well done. In fact, they remind me a lot of the old Mudvayne Harsh. I don't know what albums it is, but the older style of Harshes. Um, Dig, maybe? I don't really feel like there's a lot of Harshes on Dig, but maybe there are. Can't really remember. But that's exactly what this reminds me of. There is a ton of control there, and it sounds ultra gnarly because there isn't a lot of production placed on it, which I think is just designed to add even more abrasion to the track. But I also hear a lot of minute control over what's going on, and that's not something you usually get to hear with harsh vocals. Because there's the production and the music going on around it. It's usually difficult to hear the technique itself, and I got a pretty good glimpse at it here, so I thought that was pretty cool. If I had to pick one thing that I felt was not as satisfactory, well, can I even say this? Here's the drums. The drums were very boring to me. Everyone else got to do weird things, whether it's just that gnarly vocal style or harmonically all over the place, rhythmically all over the place. The drums felt like a home point. They they kept the peace. They were typically on the beat with their attacks. There was a very precise rigidity to their rhythms. They didn't have a harmonic element to play around with the microtonality. The production on it was even a bit clearer than everything else. I would call this lo-fi black metal, except the drums were rather clear. Everything else definitely fit into that, ultra distorted sound. The only thing I think was really off-putting about the drums was that the snare was turned off, which is a matter of taste and a little bit of production. But overall, it's a rather mundane style of drumming, both performance and sonic qualities compared to everything else in the band. And like I said, maybe that's purposeful. Maybe it's designed to hold everything together and to be the glue to the song. But when everything else is so bonkers, for once, blast beats feel ridiculously tame, and I wish they had gone the extra mile. And that's just not something I say often at all. But the rigidity of it also got on my nerves a bit. If you watched the live stream from Sunday, we got a little bit into talking about me coming to the conclusion that I'm just not a big fan of black metal's uh, metric rigidity. Everything is just constant 16th notes, constant quarter notes. It's the consistency of it all that just I need a little bit more contrast to, and hearing that here was just another element of the music that did not click with me. So, again, it's not really a bad thing. It's what black metal does. I can't really take points away for it, but it is something that was, another thing to put into the list of elements of the track I wasn't a big fan of. Lyrically, I don't know that I could have asked for anything else here. It is, it's a bit negative. It focuses in on at least what to me seems to be some sort of understanding or possibly revelation about the coldness of the world. Um, Interestingly, aside from that, multiple times says that there is desolation in the midst of music. That is a line that pops up a few times, which I think is interesting given the type of music that they're making here. There really is only one idea. It's about 6 lines long with a couple of repeated lines to flesh it out. And then we repeat it in various configurations of lines towards the end of the track. But it says, "Silent hammers of decay, the reddest rose is a ghost. The world that was ours is a world that is ours no more. Earth cares for her own ruins, not for ours. Like the deepening of frost in the slow night, when birds are dead in the morning, there is desolation in the midst of music." And to me, it just speaks of, the world doesn't care for us. The hammers of decay, the natural cycles of life that happen on our planet are silent. We don't really see them. The circle of life is something that, at least for the modern person, is something that goes unexperienced. Um, and so our experience on this planet is one that we can connect with Earth, but Earth will not connect with us. Earth does not care about us, it only cares about its own ruins. Um, and he says, like the deepening of frost in the slow night. I kind of read that as like trapped in a house in the middle of a blizzard or a snowstorm, and it's a slow night, yeah, and the snow just begins to pile up outside. You're slowly being trapped in this little box, and the earth is not going to save you. And it's that coldness of nature, and sort of the cacophony of nature, all kind of brought together in musical form to create a song that is cacophonous and doesn't care if you enjoy it or not. It simply is, much like the earth is, and you're welcome to try to connect with it if you want, but the music doesn't care if you do. And eventually you will pass, you will decay. The earth will continue on without you. And this music, this art, whether you enjoy it or not, whether you try to connect with it or not, will continue on, even past the point where you pass on, where you decay. Art is eternal. Well, possibly, at least until the same point as the earth's eternality also fades. Memory can keep art alive, but if the earth is gone, then the memories fade as well, and the art is lost also. They kind of go hand in hand. I don't know if I'm grasping for straws here, but I kind of see these parallels, and I don't know why, but I'm just speaking where my brain takes me. Those are my thoughts. Like the deepening of frost in the slow night by Jute Gyte. What did you think of this? Did you enjoy it? Was there anything in here that stood out to you? Any little nuggets of information that you're like, man, that was like super clear. How'd you not pick up on that, Bryan? Let me know if there's anything that you heard, your own perspective on this track. Let me know down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. In there, you'll find links to my music, a link to the Discord server, and ways to support the channel. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of dark ambient and check out another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.